We'll be reading an article called Choose Boring Technology by Dan McKinley, who used to work at Etsy. Probably the single best thing to happen to me in my career was having had Kellen placed in charge of me. I stuck around long enough to see Kellen's technological decision making start to bear fruit. I learned a great deal from this, but I also learned a great deal as a result of this. I would not have been I would not have been free to become the engineer that wrote data-driven products now if Kellen had not been there to so thoroughly stick the landing on technology choices. In the years since leaving Etsy, I've resurrected my ability to care about technology, and my thoughts have crystallized to the point where I can write them down coherently. What follows is the distillation of the Kellen gestalt, which will hopefully serve to horrify him only slightly. Embrace boredom. Let's say every company gets about 3 innovation tokens. You can spend these however you want, but the supply is fixed for a long while. You might get a few more after you achieve a certain level of stability and maturity, but the general tendency is to overestimate the contents of your wallet. Clearly, this model is approximate, but I think it helps. If you choose to write your website in Node.js, you just spent one of your innovation tokens. If you choose to use MongoDB, you just spent on one of your innovation tokens. If you choose to use service discovery tech that exists for a year or less, you just spent one of your innovation tokens. If you choose to write your own database, oh god, you're in trouble. Any of those choices might be sensible if you're a JavaScript consultancy or a database company, but you are probably not. You're probably working for a company that is at least ostensibly rethinking global commerce or reinventing payments on the web or pursuing some other suitably epic mission. In that context, devoting any of your limited attention to innovating SSH is an excellent way to fail, or at best, delay success. What counts as boring? That's a little tricky. Boring should not conflate it with bad. There is a technology out there that is both boring and bad. You should not use any of that. But there are many choices of technology that are boring and good, or at least good enough. MySQL is boring. Postgres is boring. PHP is boring. Python is boring. Memcached is boring. Squid is boring. Cron is boring. The nice thing about boringness, so constrained, is that the capabilities of these things are well understood. But more importantly, their failure modes are well understood. Anyone who knows me well will understand that it's only with an overwhelming sense of malaise that I now invoke the specter of Don Rumsfeld, but I must. There are some of the references that I don't understand here, and I don't know. I think some articles are written like this, and I find them a bit hard to read. And there are things like this malaise, and there are a couple of other words that I didn't understand, and yeah, it's not like my favorite writing style, because I don't know. I think this sentence, for example, could have been written differently that conveys the same meaning. But yeah, so far it's interesting. So far the article is interesting, and I agree with what they say. I think a lot of times we kind of search for what is cool, and I think, for example, with applications, there are a lot of quote unquote boring applications that are super useful. And as an example, I remember someone building an application for truck drivers, and even though there was a major problem, first thing was it was never detected, and the second thing was that no one really got interested in it because it's not quote unquote cool or fun. But I think there's once you start digging into it, I think these things are fun. These things are cool, and like it says here, MySQL, personal experience, a lot of experience in Python. It's boring. It's everywhere. It's everyone uses it, and it's not fancy. It's not cool, but I think they are. But yeah. So yeah, boring is not bad. Boring, in fact, is cool, but you just have to find it. When choosing technology, you have to both known unknowns and unknown unknowns. A known unknown is something like we don't know what happens when this database hits 100% CPU. An unknown unknown is something like, geez, it didn't even occur to us that writing stats would cause GC pauses. Both sets are typically non-empty, even for tech that existed for decades. But for shiny new technology, the magnitude of unknown unknowns is significantly larger, and this is important. Optimize globally. I unapologetically think a bias in favor of boring technology is a good thing, but it's not the only factor that needs to be considered. Technology choices don't happen in isolation. They have a scope that touches your entire team, organization, and the system that emerges from the sum total of your choices. Adding technology to your company comes with a cost. As an abstract statement, this is obvious. If you're already using Ruby, adding Python to the mix doesn't feel sensible because the resulting complexity would outweigh Python's marginal utility. But somehow, when we're talking about Python and Scala or MySQL and Redis, people lose their minds, discard all constraints, and start raving about using the best tool for the job. Your function in a nutshell is to map business problems onto a solution space that involves choice of software. If the choice of software were truly without baggage, you could indeed pick a whole mess of locally the best tools for your assortment of problems. So you have problems set and technical solution set. The way you might choose technology in a world where choices are cheap. Pick the right tool for the job. But of course, the baggage exists. We call the baggage operations and, to a lesser extent, cognitive overhead. You have to monitor the thing. You have to figure out unit tests. You need to know the first thing about it to hack on it. You need an init script. I could go on for days here, and all of this adds up fast. Again, we have problem set, technical solutions set, the way you choose technology in the world where operations are a serious concern. So we have one problem, from an element in a problem set that goes to many technical solutions. The problem with best tool for the job thinking is that it takes myopic view of the words best and a job. Your job is keeping the company in business, goddammit, and the best tool is the one that occupies least worst positions for as many of your problems as possible. It is basically always the case that the long-term costs of keeping a system working reliably vastly exceed any inconveniences you encounter while building it. Mature and productive developers understand this. Yeah, I think as developers, there's always tendency to optimize everything, and I guess the article is pointing out, it depends on what kind of function we are trying to optimize. Maybe we're optimizing in the local sense, but it's not optimized in the global sense. And the article is pointing out that it's easy to see it in the local sense, but it's harder to see it in global sense. And it's usually the local sense is the solution for that is much more tempting. But having said that, quite often for the global sense, the solution for that is quite often simpler. And sometimes simpler choices are the right choices, and they're more optimized globally. Choose new technology sometimes. Taking this reasoning to its reductio ad absurdum would mean picking Java. Like, see, this is what I mean. I don't understand what it means. But anyways, and then trying to implement a website without using anything else at all. And that would be crazy. You need some means to add things to your toolbox. An important first step is to acknowledge that this is a process and a conversation. New tech eventually has company-wide effects. So adding tech is a decision that requires company-wide visibility. Your organizational specifics may force the conversation, or they may facilitate developers adding new databases and queues without talking to anyone. One way or another, you have to set cultural expectations that this is something we all talk about. One of the most worthwhile exercises I recommend here is to consider how you would solve your immediate problem without adding anything new. I think that's probably one of the key idea in this article. Consider how you would solve your immediate problem without adding anything new. And I guess that goes to packages, technologies, and yeah, mainly those two, I guess. First, posing this question should detect the situation where the problem is that someone really wants to use the technology. If that is the case, you should immediately abort. It can be amazing how far a small set of technology choices can go. The answer to this question in practice is almost never we can't do it. It's usually just somewhere on the spectrum of, well, we could do it, but it would be too hard. If you think you can accomplish your goals with what you've got now, you're probably just not thinking creatively enough. And this kind of reminds me of using vanilla JavaScript versus like the framework like React. I think quite often there are a lot of cases to be made to use vanilla JavaScript, even though React is very popular and there's a lot of demand for React as well. But it would be interesting to really dig why. It's helpful to write down exactly what it's about the current stack that makes solving the problem prohibitively expensive and difficult. This is related to the previous exercises, but it's subtly different. New technology choices might be purely additive. For example, we don't have caching yet, so let's add memcached. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But they might also overlap or replace things you're already using. If that's the case, you should set clear expectations about migrating old functionality to the new system. The policy should typically be, we are committed to migrating with a proposed timeline. The intention of this step is to keep wreckage at manageable levels and to avoid proliferating locally optimal solutions. This process is not daunting and it's not much of a hassle. It's a handful of questions to fill out as homework, followed by a meeting to talk about it. I think that if a new technology or a new service to be created on your infrastructure can pass through this gauntlet unscathed, adding it is fine. So this is just adding more obstacles and more challenges before adding something to avoid the burden of whatever is being added, to make sure that the advantage of the thing that being added outweighs the burden of it being added. Lastly, just ship. Polyglot programming is sold with the promise that letting developers choose their own tools with complete freedom will make them more effective at solving problems. This is a naive definition of the problems at best and motivated reasoning at worst. The weight of day-to-day operational toil this creates crushes you to death. Mindful choice of technology gives engineering minds real freedom, the freedom to contemplate bigger questions. Technology for its own sake is snake oil. And I think this is a cool article, and I think this reminds me of a quote that says this actually refers to playing football. That said, playing football well is simple, but playing football simple is hard. And I think that applies to a lot of things. Quite often I feel like it's harder to keep it simple than try to do something complicated. Let's look at the footnotes here too. Etsy in its early years suffered from this pretty badly. We hired a bunch of Python programmers and decided that we needed to find something for them to do in Python. And the only thing that came to mind was creating a pointless middle layer that required years of effort to amputate. Meanwhile, the 90th percentile search latency was about 2 minutes. Etsy didn't fail, but it went several years without shipping anything at all, so it took longer to succeed than it needed to. We often casually refer to the boring, bad intersections of Doom as enterprise software, but that terminology may be imprecise. In saying this, Rumsfeld was either unintentionally or unintentionally alluding to Socratic paradox. Socrates was by all accounts a soulful individual in a number of ways that Rumsfeld is not. A good example of this from my experience is Etsy's activity feeds. When we built this feature, we were working pretty hard to consolidate most of Etsy onto PHP, MySQL, Memcached, and Gearman, a PHP job server. It was much more complicated to implement the feature on that stack than it might have been with something like Redis, but it's absolutely possible to build activity feeds on that stack. An amazing thing that happened with the project, our attention turned elsewhere for several years. During that time, activity feeds scaled up to 20 times while nobody was watching it at all. We made no changes whatsoever specifically targeted at activity feeds, but everything worked out fine as usage exploded because we were using a shared platform. This is a long-term benefit of restraint in technology choices in a nutshell. This isn't an absolute position. While activity feeds stored in Memcached was judged to be practical, and implementing full text search with faceting in raw PHP wasn't, so Etsy used Solar. Cool article, a lot to think about.